Boom. Okay, we're live. I got Ryan Condie here joining us from the beautiful state of Utah. How's it going, man?
It's going awesome. Thanks for having me.
So I've been watching your stuff for a while. You have a podcast that you're doing, Let's Buy a Business podcast, where you kind of go through everything soup to nuts of your process that you're going through right now full time on looking for businesses, scouting businesses, investors, lawyers, all that stuff in terms of going through the business acquisition process, which is something that has become nearer and dearer to my heart as I go through selling a business and trying to figure out what's next for me. So how did you kind of come to the idea of being an entrepreneur through acquiring businesses as opposed to the common narrative of like start in a garage and like work for 5 years, get venture capital, blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, go down that route. Yeah. So I've done both, right? I wouldn't say I started one path or the other. I actually took a course in college many years ago, 12 years ago, that taught you how to buy companies. And it was actually taught by a VC, is two people and from a local VC company and just like a local VC fund. And it was the only thing I learned in college. Everything else was kind of garbage, but they taught me how to buy companies. And so I kind of did the whole corporate route. I did enterprise software sales for a bunch of different tech companies. But in the meantime, I always had different side projects. I was starting companies, doing all sorts of things. And the very first time I bought a website was I'd been using this guy's wallets for years. He would take old polyester ties, Raleigh, and then he would actually turn them into wallets. Super cool business. And I loved his products, and I was went to his site and he didn't have any products on there. And I thought, hey, I'm going to try to buy this guy. So I reached out to him. He told me he wasn't for sale. I just kept calling him every 2 weeks for like 3 months. And we became buddies, and I would tell him ideas and all these, we just became friends. And after 3 months, like literally out of the blue, he called me up and said, hey man, I'm ready to sell. And I'm like, cool, well, let's do this thing. So that was kind of my first foray into like buying a company. And it was a super small purchase. I ended up growing that thing about 4X in the first year, and then just kind of sat on it, just wrote off a bunch of stuff. I learned a ton about e-commerce, was able to keep growing it. And then a few years later, I sold it. And that was like my first realization that rather than trying to learn how to sew or create a product or find manufacturing from Shenzhen or wherever you're working with, I could buy something that had customers, it had profit, and it had an awesome product. And I didn't have to go through all that. And it would take me years to figure all that stuff out, where in reality, I was able to structure a really cool equity deal, come in, blow this business up, make a ton of mistakes on it. This is 2011, 2012, made a ton of mistakes on it. It was really before Shopify picked up, and it was a little bit easier to create sites now than it was then. But that was kind of my first time. So I've done it a couple different times. I've built businesses from scratch, everything from e-commerce brands to I started a candy factory from scratch. We did wholesale chocolates and fudge, and it's actually, you can find them now in Sam's Club and Walgreens. So I've done a little bit of everything, but I probably started like 8 companies, and really only 2 of them lasted longer than like a weekend and actually made money and weren't big write-offs. So since I've done this a few different times and the transactions have gotten bigger and bigger, a few months ago, I thought, hey, I'm just going to document this whole process and tell everybody what I'm doing. So Raleigh, I don't have like an MBA or anything like that. I've just self-taught, a lot of YouTube videos, talking to people who do deals. I'm constantly just trying to learn more and then just share that knowledge. And so to me, in reality, you hear the stat that like 96% of businesses fail in the first few years. And that's exactly right. But I've also heard the opposite stat, where about 90% of acquisitions are still in business in 5 years.
Yeah.
Kind of the Lindy effect. Like if a company's been around for 5 years, they're probably going to be around for another 5 years. Or if it's been around for 20 years, there's a pretty good chance that company's going to be around for 20 years. So I actually think acquisition, entrepreneurship through acquisition, is like a better.
You cut out for a second.
Like you want to be your own boss, you want to run your own company. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know what's up with the audio. I just would say, I think the entrepreneurship through acquisition is actually a better path for most people, especially Raleigh, if they're making a switch from like corporate America and want to be their own boss.
Right. How do you think about now? Oh, I have two questions. How was that first deal structured? Was it just the cash, or you try to do seller financing?
Yeah.
What was
So
the
the very first deal wasn't very big. So my second deal was a lot bigger, and I did it. I had a company in the space, and I acquired a competitor, and I did it through the cash flows of my current business paired up with an SBA loan. That's a common 7 to 10 year terms.
still there? Did I lose you?
Dang, man, I don't know what's up. Do I need to?
No, that was good. So I heard
Okay.
7 to 10 year terms on the SBA loan.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a really common way of going about it. And Raleigh, with that, you're just going to do like the interest rate is prime plus a couple percentage points.
Right.
So the other way I did it is I did an equity deal where he was ready to get out. So I think there's two types of companies that are kind of distressed, that are interesting to buy. One is a distressed company and one is a distressed seller. In my case, I actually found a distressed seller. A distressed company is a company that's going out of business. That's
Right.
a big turnaround project. People have the appetite and the skill set for that, Raleigh, and some people don't. When
Yeah.
it comes to like a distressed seller, it's they're bored of their company, or they went through a divorce, or they want to retire, or whatever it might be. Those are great businesses to buy, because that first deal I structured where I basically took over the business, had a cash injection into the business to kind of get some life back into it. And he was able to retain about 25% of the company, so that if I ever sold it down the road, he would get a nice payday. And, of
Yeah.
course, a few years later, he got a really nice payday. And his payday at 25% was significantly more than he would have ever got had he just sold it to me outright at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I didn't have to really put any money down to buy that company.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting because you also there's like a frequency that people go through as an entrepreneur. Like I go through periods where I'm totally stoked about my business and I wouldn't sell it for $100 million. And then it can be 3 months later where I'm like, I will take 10 grand if I just don't have to touch this thing ever again. And I don't think people realize that if you can find a way, I think the trick is finding a way that you can kind of ingratiate yourself with entrepreneurs who are running businesses that you would be potentially interested in acquiring. And if you can find a way to not be annoying to them, not be a spur in their saddle for long enough, you'll probably go through that frequency with them. And if you can be kind of top of mind when they go through I will let this business go for $10,000 and you're there, like you can get involved a lot easier than you probably think that you can.
I would completely agree. So there's so many ways to approach it. And the biggest thing you can do is build rapport with an owner, whether it's for sale or not. They're going to want to trust you better if you're friends. People like doing business with friends. That's why they say like business deals are done over golf. They just want to hang out and be buddies. And so not that you have to go golfing with them, but it's that same mindset. If you're building rapport with that particular owner, you have a much better leg in. And so there's a million ways to structure deals. And so a lot of it's coming down to what your personal preferences are, how much capital you can deploy, or whether you have investors, or what's your appetite. And if you're able to find an owner who is actually really ready to get out because of not because they're just looking for a huge payday, but for other reasons. And it could be just health, it could be life circumstances. And a lot of times you're not trying to take advantage of anybody. You're still paying them the value of the business, but you could be doing it over time as like a seller finance deal. Right. So you can use the cash flows from the business to pay for that business over time. Or, you're basically coming in, stepping in to save that business, save its customers, its products, and of course, save their employees and the jobs. So there's a lot of ways to structure deals. I don't know when people are going to listen to this, Raleigh, but it's, the last day in April of 2020, people will look back and say, hey, COVID-19, this is a really weird time. For the last several years, it's been a big seller's market. It's been a really good time to sell. I think over the next few months and the next few years, it'll actually switch from a buyer or seller's market to a buyer's market. And every market does this, whether it's real estate or whether, whatever it is, it's always going to switch from a buyer to a seller market. And in this case, I think it's actually switching over to a buyer's market over the next couple years. I could be totally wrong on that, but I think there's going to be a lot of people who want to retire, who want to move on, take that next step. Whereas someone who's really looking to own a business, but not necessarily want to start from scratch or have that idea, whatever, they can step into a great business, structure a great path to take over this business. And you don't necessarily need to have millions of dollars to do that.
Yeah. What do you think? I completely agree with you. Again, as a seller and a buyer playing both sides of the market, I think that there will be a lot of zombie companies where sellers were planning on getting another 2 or 3 years of cash flow. And as that cash flow goes to zero I think that there are a lot of kind of deferred expenses in businesses that owners were planning on kind of kicking the can down the road, and coronavirus has kind of forced pressure on marketing systems, CapEx systems, operational systems, and to relaunch everything. There's this, in a lot of businesses, I think there's going to be a kind of Herculean effort to kind of bring everything up to speed. And I think a lot of owners will look at that Herculean effort to get back to where they were and just say, I mean, like a sale is like not a horrible idea.
Yeah. I think the time was so good for the last decade that I think everybody was like, hey, this is going to last forever. So many business owners probably should have sold a couple years ago, but the times were too good. And I think two things will happen. Either I guess three, the business goes out of business, and that's a really cheap business to buy, or the business makes it through this whole COVID-19, 2020 kind of weird thing in the market. That's going to show that business is very resilient. That's a great business to buy, and it's going to be able to get through a lot of tough times. And then that third option is, I think the business that makes through it, and then the owner is like, exactly what you said, I'm out. I want to be done. I want to retire. I want to move on. And I think they're going to be much more willing to have like a seller financed deal where they're taking where they're carrying that seller note longer, or whatever it might be. But I think a lot of people are going to be like, hey, I don't have the chops or the really willpower to go through this grind again to get it back to what it was, and they're going to want out.
Yeah. What do you think about how do you think about minority interest deals relative to just buy the business, let me take this over, versus more of a let me stay in my lane and kind of do, if you have a marketing background or something, add and taking a piece that way?
So that's a really interesting structure. I think it works well for a lot of people. If the business is lacking what your skill set can add to it, then I think that's good. Like in that example, like if you have an operator who's really good at operating, but you don't have like the marketing chops, that operator doesn't have the marketing chops. Well, they would actually be better pairing up with someone who does have the marketing chops. Or if someone is really good at marketing and not good at operations, they're better off pairing with someone who can do the operational side. Now, it's tricky to say, minority ownership is good or bad or whatever it might be. I think it's just depends on the deal structure and the working relationship. Is it a silent partner? Are you going to be more hands-on, or you taking over 25% of the company? Does that also entail that you're going to run all the Google ads, Facebook ads, that sort of thing? So I think in the right structure, they can be great. I actually have seen a lot of those deals. Keep in mind, it's a marriage, it's a partnership, and ultimately you invest in an idea, but it does lead back to you're investing in a person. And so when I'm not like a venture back or a venture capitalist or even worked at a VC fund or anything, but a lot of times they're investing in the people, knowing that that person will eventually find success, whether it's that idea or the pivot that they make. So keep that in mind as you get a minority share. I think those are great ways to take over, especially if you can add something of value to that company that isn't necessarily tied to the monetary side. So I think there's deals what you could do, Raleigh, where if that business is lacking your skill set, you can do an equity piece and you're just applying what your skill set already is. Yeah. So I love those deals. I think those are great deals. But keep in mind, you're going to be working with someone, so you want to get to know them really well. And, what happens when there's a little bit extra, or someone wants to throw their card payment under the business, like it can get really weird sometimes. Yeah. So
how do you think about if I'm in a day job that probably doesn't love the idea of me moonlighting as a self-funded venture capitalist, how do you think about outreach, kind of doing outreach outside of, you can always go to a business broker and that's kind of the white glove service, I guess. But how do you think about kind of trying to get to the, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've actually done this too when I had a corporate day job, and it is going to be tricky because you're going to find your time really, really, really limited, right? So the biggest thing, if you've got a job, it's kind of the best time to get an SBA loan. It's the
Right.
best time to look for a business because you've kind of got your bases covered. At the same time, you're going to be focused on so many different things. It's really easy to learn, to waste a lot of time or never find a business to buy. The biggest thing you probably, unless you've got like the best employer on earth, you probably don't want to tell your employer that you're looking to buy a company. And
Yeah.
even like if you're doing a lot of online businesses, even like most online businesses that are sub $1 million in revenue, they probably don't have any employees, or they just have like a couple freelancers, and you can actually run that business with your day job. Like you might be getting up at 5 a.m., 4 a.m. on some days to do some stuff, or you're working Saturdays and Sundays on your side business. But that's just how it is. If you want to have a side business and kind of take it to the next level, I think that's actually a good option. And doing deals while you have a job is phenomenal because you've got your baseline covered. About 90, I keep saying the word 90, but these are actually pretty real stats there, Raleigh. About 90% of all searchers never find a company to buy. Yeah. And so it's really hard to find a company to buy that fits your skill sets and your capital requirements, industries, or locations that you want to be in. So the way to prolong that is, there's a form of searching that's like a professional searcher, or they set up a search fund where people pay for them to go find companies to buy. They typically last about 2 years. Most of those search funds end at 2 years with never finding a company, and that person just goes and gets a job. So that's definitely what you don't want to do. So having a job to kind of cover your baseline, whether you're doing it through an exit like you, I actually exited an e-commerce company a few months back in early 2020. And that's when I went full-time in it because I knew I had a long time. I had a long runway with the ability to then invest in a company I wanted to buy. So yes. I think it's great to do it. You just got to be super disciplined. The other thing is, in the experience that I've seen, if you're looking for a company to buy, you shouldn't be laying in bed and scrolling through like Biz Buy Sell or whatever, because it's like you're on Instagram. That's like a horrible way to go about it. You're going to lose a lot of time and effort. Keep it structured. If you want to look for a company and you have limited time, or you have a day job or kids or whatever, you should focus on like 30 minutes. Your first thing you do right when you get up, go check these sites, make sure it's, you're looking at these companies, and then, treat it like a real job. Because anytime you're just scrolling through like it's an Instagram feed, you're just going to waste a ton of time, and you're going to fill your head with a bunch of garbage because you're going to be looking at like an online business to like the local tow truck company. And you really need to be focused when you're looking at companies to buy.
What are some of those sites that you would recommend that are worth looking at? And I guess the part of the other question in terms of how you go about doing it, when you kind of have to keep it where you can't, like you're going about it a very public way, kind of saying, I'm looking for, you've been able, I assume, to build a little bit of deal flow from an insourcing instead of just always going out and searching.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So, can you hear me? It said my internet was
you're
unstable. Good. Okay. So it's like the death of Zoom calls, or here we go, death by Zoom calls. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to approach it. Some good websites to answer the first part of the question are like quietlightbrokerage.com. Another good one is FE International, F as in Frank, E as in Empire, FE International. These are mainly for online businesses. bizbuysell.com is a common one. If you just search for, like if you're in Charlotte, you just search for, local Charlotte business brokers, or if you're in Miami, you do the same thing, and you'll have local businesses pop up. I don't know why, but about 90% of brokers that I meet are pretty crummy. So you will need to generate your own deal flow. And most of the deals that I see done, and the deals you want to hear about and the deals you want to do, a lot of times, not broker deals, but it's just kind of self-outreach. And so the biggest downside of not having Like if you can't tell your employer and you can't put it on your LinkedIn profile and tell everybody, on Facebook, you're looking for a company to buy, is that people don't know. And so what I have found is the more I talk about it, the more deals come my way. And most of them haven't been good fits for me, or just haven't been good businesses or good fits for me. But then you find those 2 or 3 that, they've never talked to a broker. You've got some great conversations. Those are really where you can develop a cool relationship with the seller. So those are some good resources, but at the same time, you will need to create your own deal flow, and you'll kind of, based on your own circumstances, you'll need to figure out how to do that, whether you can be super public about it or whether you're kind of just telling friends and family and people that are kind of the connectors, or just people that are well networked, that you're looking for businesses to buy. That's probably the way to go about it. If you're worried about telling your employer, probably wouldn't recommend it then. That's the right answer, to not tell your employer.
Yeah, no,
but it will be the hardest thing to create that own deal flow.
Yeah. And one thing that I've found has worked really well is I reach out to business development associates at private equity firms that deal in the spaces that I'm interested in. I only did this because I have some buddies that are in acquisitions at big PE funds. And so, PE funds get a lot of inflow. If you're a big PE fund, you get all these little businesses that try to apply and say they want to get bought for 10x. And so I've just barely started to do this, and I've had a little bit of success where I have my business development associates send me the companies that are just way too small for private equity to get interested in. And so I've gotten 10 or 15 they just give me the company name, and then I kind of try to find them on LinkedIn, and I've had a couple calls that have been okay.
Hey, that's brilliant, man. I'm totally stealing that. I'm definitely stealing that.
It's actually been like a secret that I found like in the past couple of weeks, but I think it's actually been like super helpful because it's not out there. It's not super public.
Hey, we'll make a public pact. You take everything east of the Mississippi, I'll do west of the Mississippi.
I need south. I need Texas, Arizona. All right,
Texas,
man. I know you got to hop off, but I appreciate the time. I think if you're interested in it, Let's Buy a Business podcast by Ryan Condie. It's super clutch in terms of going step by step. He's taken everybody kind of from the very beginning. So I know you got this call you got to hop to, but we'll catch up soon. I appreciate the time, and good luck on the continued search.
Hey, thanks, Raleigh. We'll talk to you soon.
How are we going? Bye.
You too.